Alright, so a little bit of background. So basically I have set this up to where there is a yellow base layer. You can kind of see it in some places right here where it kind of spilled over. Definitely right in there. There's some yellow. Let me adjust my light. There we go. So there's some yellow. You can definitely see it right up there. So I used basically a yellow shade on that. For everything else that's green, at least on the wisp smoke parts, all of that was done with the speed paint orc flesh, which is this one right here, the speed paint orc skin. This paint has an interesting property that it can be reactivated with water, and so the effect that I'm going to show is how to kind of do a smoke effect or a wisp effect by tinting the layer first. So this is all alpha zenithal highlight. You can see all the grayscale in there, and then all like basically white from top down, so it naturally shades it. So for something like speed paint or contrast paint, this technique is really useful. So all I'm going to do is, this is just water, right? There's no other additives. I'm just going to wet the brush, and then I'm just going to start reactivating the paint and kind of almost scrubbing it off to make that yellow base layer start to shine through, and you can start to see it there. And so the more that you scrub, the more the paint starts to reactivate. So you can really start to see it starting to pop in right there. And so you can use this technique, and you can see, like, as I do this, let's see, there's a little bit of part right there. So as I take the water and reactivate and kind of scrub this off, as I wipe off my brush, it's actually removing the paint. So it's kind of almost like how you would use oil paints for shading, or it's kind of like reverse dry brushing. But it's a really useful technique to do wisps and smoke. So you can kind of see at the bottom there, there's a little bit more yellow. So we're just going to keep doing that kind of all over the model and reactivating the paint and pulling it back off. And then what I'll do after this is to take a bright yellow, maybe even some kind of a neon yellow, to highlight up those areas even more to make that stand out. So now you can start to see there's already that wispy transition effect between the green and the yellow. And we're just going to keep doing that all the way around here. So get down there. And I'm just scrubbing the paint off kind of the top layer, clearing off my brush, and then wetting out another area and just going around and removing paint. So you can kind of see the yellow starting to pop through. Rinse off the brush. And other things you can do with this paint is for, like, if you're going to feather a color, or if you're going to work on some kind of transition from one color to another, this will be really, really useful, because the ability to reactivate the base paint color is really the one part about these paints that I love. I initially hated it, because if you use contrast paints, you know, you just apply it once and then you kind of clean up after that. The idea of these paints can be reactivated, to me, before discovering this technique, seemed like a downside, because, like, the last thing I want to do is be painting something and then have all my color and layer work suddenly disappear, or to, like, accidentally take off the base color. But the more and more you use them, you can kind of see now there's some more yellow poking through, and you can use that as a guide for where you want to do your highlights. So you can really see that yellow starting to pop through. We're going to do the same thing all over. And we're just, so like back here, lots of green. And so it's all the raised area. So this area right here, I'm about to start scrubbing off right under there, right under the fold of his cloak. And again, this is just water with a yellow under base layer. And you can see the paint just slowly start to come off there. And it's just kind of a scrubbing motion. You're literally just scrubbing the paint off, and now you've got that yellow line popping through. We're going to do the same thing up here. And just clearing off the excess pigment in the brush onto the paper towel with some water, and then just moving along the miniature. And it's a really great time-saving technique without having to like go get oil paints or deal with different oil paint thinners and like white spirits, and you don't even have to mix oil paints. This is all just acrylic. And they have a lot of different colors. I did the same effect on this green goblin as well, where I did a little bit of yellow here and dragged it down that way, and gray here and dragged it up, and did a kind of a seamless transition that made this billowing smoke cloud effect. Did the same thing on Croc here with all this water, where it was this deep vibrant blue first, and then I scrubbed off a bunch of the blue and then mixed in some kind of a plague bearer flesh, which is like a limey kind of decay green color, to really make that New York water. So with this, we're just going to keep going. Let's see, where else do we want in there? That's for sure. Let's get some in there. And I recommend like a flat. If you want a brush with a little bit of spring in it, kind of a flat surface is good. So each of those bristles can help remove that paint layer. And so we're going to do the same thing in the back. And so now it's really got a nice yellow to green transition. And all I've done is I painted it yellow first, I put the speed paint on top of it, and then I went and just started removing it. Some in there. He's got a little bit of under right in here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I will scrub some of that off as well. So I did everything with the zenithal first to have the shadows automatically be there, so I didn't have to do a bunch of extra shadowing work. That looks good. And then we're going to do the back of the cloak area. So on this one, we'll just scrub these off here. And when you're working adjacent to these unpainted white areas, you want to be a little bit more careful, because the paint will transfer off of the area that's painted and onto the unprimed or the primed surface. So if you're worried about using a lighter color in that area, you don't want to cause any stainage. Alright, so there we go. So that one's good. Let's do the same thing up here. And the other thing about this speed paint is I've done a couple tests, and it seems like it doesn't matter how long you let it set. And that's kind of one of the negative points that a lot of folks have been complaining about, is like how long the reactivation effect lasts. And as long as you do a clear coat, like either a satin or a matte coat or whatever your goal is. I use Tester's dull coat in between my layers, and that will protect the layer from sloughing off in the future. You just got to give it enough time to dry. But just kind of scrubbing off the surfaces like this. Sorry, you can't see there because my hand's in the way. And you can see how much green paint has come off the model there, because it's quite a lot. But that yellow just pops through a little bit, and then we can go back over and apply some more yellow to really seal in the effect in some highlighted areas. But for any kind of billowing smoke, fire, this technique is really, really useful. And I would say it's worth the $4.50 to go grab the color of speed paint you want to use this technique, and then save you a bunch of time. Unless you really want to figure out how to do flames or billowing colors. But my goal is to get models painted. And so there you have it. So kind of like now have a yellow to green transition. You can see it's stronger in some areas, and I will go back over and highlight, and I'll show that just real quick. So the yellow color I'm going to use for the first layer is going to be not that one. That's the wrong yellow. That is toxic waste green, which means my yellow is actually over here. There we go. I'm going to use high key yellow, or Mardic yellow from scale 75. Put it on my palette. Grab a thin brush. Bring this into the frame a little bit. There we go. Grab some water, grab a little bit of paint, thin it down. So you just have a little bit on the tip there. You can barely see it. And then now we'll just start to go over kind of the raised areas to really mesh in that yellow and complete the effect. Hi, Anubis. And there you have it. And you just kind of go over all the areas that have the yellow now poking through. You just, with a thin down mixture, you go over those again to really start to highlight up. You could also leave it as well. You don't have to go back and highlight these up, but I like to kind of grab the color to complete the effect. I only really do it on the raised areas, and the areas where the yellow is starting to poke through a bit, and just make it look a bit more natural there. So some right there, some down here, some all along there. You can kind of see it's just quick and easy way to get that effect. So I definitely recommend, if you want this kind of effect, or if you don't, if you're like me and you were hesitant about like how the heck am I going to paint all these wisp and smoke effects on these miniatures, like it's literally been a reason why I'm like, I don't know, you know, I'll build up a bunch. Like I have a ton of hi Anubis. Oh, it looks like it's dinner or lunchtime. I have a bunch of brimstone horrors, which are a zine kind of flaming elemental model that I have to paint up, and I'm like, I don't have any idea how I'm going to do this fire. And then I started experimenting with this technique, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly how I'm going to do that fire. Now this is going to be really, really easy. And so that's it. That's the entire technique. Do your base coat, you do the color you want it to transition to, and then you can go back over and highlight up the other color, and you can kind of see really quickly. I know I've said quickly a couple times here. I don't know how long this video has been going for. I assume it's been about probably 10 minutes, but we'll see the final timestamp at the end. But this is a really great technique, and I definitely recommend trying it out. If you have any questions, go and send them my way. Throw them in the comments. I put way too much yellow on right there. And enjoy your painting.